As was said, my name is Father Simon Lobo. I'm with the Companions of the Cross, and it's just a joy to be here. I think the last time that I was here in Saskatchewan, if I recall, was in 2010, speaking at Rock the Mount, not far from here, actually. So, was anybody there by any chance? Yeah, if you were there, most people who were there didn't come back, so that's understandable. I don't blame them. But anyways, you're here tonight. The students have been putting up with me for the whole week. They've been enduring me, you could say. And we'll see if the rest of you make it through the night. But I'm excited for tonight's talk. It's something that's been on my heart for a while to speak about, and it's the first time I'm really collecting a bunch of thoughts together in one place. So here we go. I thought I'd begin by just pointing out a few people in my life who have been significant in modeling endurance. My parents, first of all, Maria and Ben Lobo, who have been married for over 36 years, which is longer than I've been alive. You guys are sharper than the students, man. They struggle with some of my humor this week. And then Father Bob, and some subliminal messages there about our Companions website. We actually have a brand new Companions of the Cross website that works well with mobile phones and everything else, smartphones, all that stuff. So check it out, companionscross.org. Little shameless self-advertising. But Father Bob, Father Bob. Anybody know Father Bob? He's certainly back in the day would have passed through these parts as well, but a priest for, I believe, 56 years plus, the founder of the Companions of the Cross, who passed away October 6, 2011. And I look to him as, apart from the priesthood of Jesus Christ, of course, my model in priesthood is Father Bob. And today is the feast of St. Robert Bellarmine. This wasn't planned, but his namesake and who he loved very much. So I wanted to ask for St. Robert's intercession and really dedicate this talk as well to Father Bob, who modeled endurance. What's the first image that is conjured up for you when you think of endurance? I mean, for me, it's kind of that race image, maybe not the tortoise and the hare, but the idea of a race. You know, we've often heard it said, the spiritual life, you know, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? And of course, that's consistent with Scripture. So please turn in your Bibles to 1 Corinthians. You guys brought your Bibles, right? No, did anybody bring a Bible here? Ooh, okay. This is a real Catholic community. So the first little exhortation for you. Did anybody bring a pen and paper at least? Oh, good. Okay, so that's not too bad. I've spoken to groups, especially of young adults, who they don't bring a pen and paper, and I'm like, you know, basically you're telling me you don't think there's anything I'm going to say that's worth remembering, right? But bring your Bible as well. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, starting at verse 24. This is Paul. He's speaking to this young church in Greece, where they were surrounded by Olympic fever, right? And this is what he says. Do you not know that in a race, all the runners compete, but only one receives the prize? Run that you may obtain it. In other translations, run so as to win. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I pummel my body and subdue it, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. So Paul is giving us this image of running the race to the finish, right? Run so as to win. And that's really what we are talking about. Now, the great irony, this water bottle, by the way, has accompanied me on pretty much all of my endurance adventures, you could say. Faithful companion. But the irony is I hate running. I really do. I do it because it's good for me. Occasionally I do it. But I remember when I was like 8 or 9 years old, our school had this Terry Fox team or whatever. Do you guys have that? You're familiar with that? Okay, I'm surprised. I thought most people here would be homeschooled, so they wouldn't have. It's like, they wouldn't have known what I was talking about. I mean, I didn't want to be offensive or anything, but I was thinking, just picturing. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, it's like the cross country team. So if you were homeschooled, maybe like running with your brothers and sisters around the yard was the equivalent. But anyways, so in my school there was I remember tryouts, and there were 33 of us trying out for the Terry Fox team. I was like 8 years old, and the coach could take 30 people with him for the race. Guess who got cut? Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not looking for pity or whatever, but I am saying that I didn't love running, and you can imagine. And by the way, a bunch of girls were faster than me. It's not a sexist comment, but in the psyche of an 8-year-old, that's rough. I've had to endure a lot of inner healing ever since. But I didn't foresee myself as the candidate to speak about endurance. That's what I'm trying to say. But in all humility, as I look back over my life, these last few years, it seems like the Lord's been preparing me. He's been blessing me with these different experiences, and I believe that the thing needed most, if I dare say that, especially I'm speaking to the young people here, one of the things I think you need most to develop within yourself is the virtue of endurance. I'd like to share some of my experiences, 4 in particular: tree planting, cycling across Canada, walking the Camino of Santiago, and being on a 30-day Ignatian retreat. And we'll see if we can make it through and see if we can learn a few lessons on the journey. Okay, so starting with tree planting, that's not an accurate depiction. But so I lived in a tent basically for 3 months. We'd move around every few days or so. You can keep going there, Liz. Yeah, you can just cycle through them. So that's a beautiful sunset one day. Got to fly around in helicopters. We would often do our laundry by hand in the middle of these wood blocks. And here's me learning how to plant a tree, I guess. And then you can leave it there. So this is one of my good buddies that I met tree planting. So essentially, if you want my advice, don't go tree planting. It's a brutal job. The days are long. The bugs are horrific. The work is exhausting. But I kind of liked it. I don't know if that was sadistic or what. But outdoors all day long. That feeling of putting in a good day's work, that physical exertion, and I got to see some beautiful parts of the country. Mainly we were in northern Alberta near Slave Lake. We went down to Kananaskis country and in around Crow's Nest Pass, and then we were in northern Saskatchewan, a little north of Candle Lake. So got to see a few neat spots. It was really an adventure. Like there were times where we were in these isolated camps. We'd fly in by helicopter. This was my first time riding in a helicopter, and our whole camp, like they'd fly in fridges and stoves and all kinds of stuff to set up these camps while we'd plant trees. I think part of it appealed to my pride, right? Like I can tell people, hey, I was tough enough to plant trees. But the biggest challenge in tree planting was not the work. It was actually the camp life. That was what I found to be the most difficult or challenging, stretching me out of my comfort zone. Not that it's been deliberate, but I think so much of my life has been lived inside this Catholic bubble, right? And I don't know if you can relate to that, but this was a huge education for me in the world. Today I was with the students talking about the world, the flesh, the devil. So I got a real dose of the world, and I kind of discovered like there's millions of people out there who don't think the things that I think, who don't believe the things that I believe, and who behave in totally different ways from me. I don't want to get into too much detail here, but yeah, everything you can imagine, the drinking, drugs, promiscuity, different orientations, everything. There's this whole kind of hippie culture. Like some people, they would just plant all summer, and then they'd snowboard all winter and like go on EI. You know, it was just a bizarre. I was unfamiliar with this kind of thing. But thankfully, I had this one friend. We called him T. His name is too hard to pronounce, but he's originally from Eritrea, this small little country near Ethiopia, and super intelligent. He actually had several degrees and was the most humble guy, joyful, and just a tremendous brother who didn't get into all the craziness. So it was great being with him. As you can see, like we'd wear these bags. So there's actually 3 bags, one on each side, one behind, and they'd be filled with little trees, probably 12 inches long, these little saplings. And the way it worked, I guess I'll just try and demonstrate. We'd have these shovels that are about the length of my arm. You'd hold the shovel in one arm, kind of blade backwards, and then you just reach out and take a step forward, jam the shovel into the ground, pull back, and kind of with a C cut pulling back the earth, you'd have a little sapling in your other hand. You'd put that into the ground, you'd stomp down to close the hole, and then you'd take a next step, pull out another tree, jam it in, same thing, and you'd keep going, right? That was basically, one time we videotaped it. I managed to plant like 7 trees in 30 seconds, which is, that was an exception, but it's trying to set the world record for. But you can imagine, like, so initially there was this interesting learning curve, you're learning how to do it, making mistakes, whatever. But then over time, it just became extremely monotonous. Like, day in, day out. I think once we got good, we were planting about 3,000 trees a day. The same motion, right? Over and over and over again. Talk about endurance. But by the way, I'm not bragging, because the guys who were really good, they would plant like 5,000 or 6,000 trees a day, if you can imagine. Every 4 days, they would probably clear $2,000 in cash. That's what they were making every shift. But anyways, one thing that for me tree planting really did was it helped, and this is why I'm starting with this one. It helped clarify the goal. Like, what's the goal? What's your motivation? What is driving you to keep going? Because at the beginning of our season, there was quite a huge crew of planters, and by the end, we had been reduced to at least half. I mean, some people left, they had other plans, some people had injuries they had to leave as a result of. And certainly with myself, there were days where I wanted to quit. I mean, there were some days the weather was terrible, the foremen were not the nicest people in the world, the terrain was hilly. There were days where I'd strike my shovel into the ground and I'd hit a rock every single time, and it would just send a tremor right up my whole arm. And so on days like that, and not to mention the wasps and everything else, I was just ready to give up. What was motivating? What was the goal? For some people, they wanted to go tree planting because they thought, there's going to be a good party. This is going to be really fun. We're going to get to do all kinds of craziness. For others, it was their boyfriend or their girlfriend, some significant other is going, so I'm going to follow them and go with them. For many of these, it didn't last very long, right? For others, they wanted to save the planet. Like, let's plant trees, save the environment, and I'm sure Captain Planet would be very pleased. But even for them, that was not enough of a motivation. And I tell you, by the end of the summer, I had probably planted just shy of 100,000 trees. That's an actual fact. I didn't make that up. I think I was one box shy of 100,000. The Lord was teaching me humility. I wasn't following my stats close enough. But do you guys remember when Prince William first got married and he and Kate came on a little tour of Canada, and they went up as part of their honeymoon? I mean, Canada is the obvious destination for anybody's honeymoon, right? They went up to Slave Lake, Alberta, where there had been all kinds of forest fires. So pretty much all of the 100,000 trees that I planted, there goes saving the planet in a puff of smoke. What is the only reason that somebody would be foolish enough to spend their entire summer going through that arduous physical labor of planting trees? What would it be? Why would anybody do that? I'm asking, seriously. For money. That's the goal. If you're not planting because you're determined to make money, you will fail. Guaranteed. You'll give up. You'll throw it when you get to one of those tough days, you'll walk away. No, there's nothing forcing you to stay, right? So, and that's what will happen. If making money isn't your number one priority, if that is not what is motivating you, then you will not succeed as a tree planter. That's a fact. Now, I actually was moderately successful as a rookie. I made enough money that summer to buy my first car. It was actually a smart car, so it was half a car, but nevertheless, I'm just a little guy, so it didn't matter. So, but I say this to you: what is the goal? If we're going to talk about endurance, if we're going to talk about sticking it out on those days when we want to give up, what is the goal? What is driving you? What is the one thing that you cannot live without? And if that is not super clear in your mind, you will give up. You will give up. There will come a day where you'll take the back door out, you'll take the easy way out, you'll give up. I'll tell you what it is for me. And I didn't make this up. A friend told me this probably when I was younger than some of the students here. Maybe about 15 years ago, we'll say. This friend said, I'm going to summarize it in 2 points. I'm kind of paraphrasing here. Number one, I want to get my carcass into heaven. Number one. And number two, I want to bring as many people with me as possible. I want to get to heaven, and I want to bring as many people with me as possible. And that's the goal. That's certainly one way you can articulate it, right? And if you make that clear in your mind, in your heart, you will keep persevering when the going gets tough. Another way of saying that is the call to holiness, the call to mission, which is a beautiful thing that we've been reminded of by so many of the documents of Vatican II, by John Paul II, and other popes. This universal call, not just for priests and nuns, but for all of us to become holy, to become saints, and to be missionary, both and. That I would get my carcass to heaven and bring as many with me as possible. Is that clear? That's the goal. Let that, I've been saying about this for different things, but, if you're going to get a tattoo, don't get a tattoo, but if you're going to get a tattoo, that would be it. Okay, next. Don't get a tattoo. Cycling across Canada. So here we are. We'll go through a few pictures. This is my buddy Brian, who I was with. He looks like he's in pain. He's not acting. This is going up hills, down hills. I think this is in northern Ontario by Lake Superior. There's a nice shot. I think that photo might have even been taken in Saskatoon. You can see the saddlebags front and back, and you can just leave it there, Liz. And this is, anybody know where that is? Our Lady of Combermere at Madonna House in Combermere, Ontario. So we were towards the end of the journey at that point. Cycling across Canada. So this was the next summer, 2007. And one of my highlights from that trip actually before the cycling began, a friend of mine asked me if I would help out at a summer camp, a Knights of Columbus camp, just north of Lloydminster. And it was there that I met this little blonde-haired kid named Kelly. Except he wasn't that little, even back then. He was a big kid. But truly, one of the highlights of the summer. So to be honest, we didn't bike the whole way across Canada. We only biked from Edmonton to Ottawa. So I know that's kind of a bit of a misleading, but a different summer we biked from Vancouver to Calgary. So we just have to do the eastern seaboard there at some point. But we did this Edmonton to Ottawa stretch, and the first thing I would say is that the prairies, like I love the prairies. I love people in the prairies. Beautiful people, very warm, loving, friendly. I live with a priest from Saskatchewan. His name's Father Galen. Wonderful man. Love him dearly. But when it comes to cycling, to use the biblical language, the prairies are like a wasteland of howling desert. There is no protection from the wind. I mean, it's brutal. And I remember this one day, we were in such a hard headwind, we were struggling to maintain 8 kilometers an hour. You can almost walk that fast. And at one point, this swather pulled out in front of us on the shoulder or whatever, and we tucked in behind him. We're like drafting, like they do in the Tour de France. We're drafting behind the swather. We got up to 12 kilometers an hour, and we were like thrilled. This is awesome. The other thing about the prairies is, like at the start of the day, you might see a grain elevator off in the distance, and you can like stop and set camp at the end of the day, and you still haven't reached. You guys are laughing, but it's discouraging. The other thing we made, this was a real rookie mistake. So I blew out a tire in Saskatoon, and so we got a new tire and everything, and my buddy is like pretty handy, so, but the thing we didn't realize is my bike was so old. It was this retro Peugeot from the 80s that I was riding on. And we bought a metric tire to put on an imperial-sized rim. And so it kind of fit, but there was like this little bulge in the rim, or in the tire, I should say. And so the whole way from Saskatoon down to Regina, it's like every single revolution, there was a little hop. So I'm like cycling along. Like, I kid you not, I felt like I was in the circus. It was. So, I mean, some of my memories of the prairies were not, I'd rather forget. But anyways, one of the things with bicycle touring, what I realized is it really, you need to kind of be in somewhat decent shape. Just about anybody could do it if they had the time, I think. But what really helps is being a good bike mechanic. And thankfully my friend was. He was pretty experienced. And I mean, this was something, because of all the weight and the load and the distances we're going and the fact that we're riding bikes that are like older than we are, we went through a lot of mechanical troubles. So one day pulling into Dryden in Western Ontario, I remember I broke 5 spokes, and then we're like pulling into this grocery store, and I get a flat tire. And it's just like, oh my gosh, what a day. And so my friend went into the grocery store to buy some groceries and stuff, and meanwhile I'm like in the air-conditioned entranceway changing the tire and everything. And so later that day, we were going to be staying with people that he knew, this older couple, and were graciously having us over. And the husband was going to meet with some of his buddies later that evening, and he comes back and he says, like I was there telling them, I have these two guests who are cycling across Canada. And his one friend's like, yeah, I think I saw them. One of them looks like a hippie. The other guy looks like he's with the Taliban. So anyways, he wanted to take a picture of us and put a caption below that read, "Give peace a chance." Anyways, my experience with the whole bicycle maintenance thing, it's interesting. Initially, I was very content with letting Brian fix all my spokes and everything for me, true the rims and fix the flats and whatever. But over time, I started to, want to do it myself. And last night, the students, we did this temperaments thing with Jim, and I'm primarily a choleric, if that means anything to you. And my secondary temperament is choleric as well. And so, basically, like, I need to be in charge. I need to take control. And so here we are, and I'm like, I'm asking him to teach me how do you change a flat tire, like I'm a complete doofus. And so he's like patiently helping me in whatever I'm making mistakes. But over time, I really appreciated it because it kind of gave me a degree of dignity in being able to do some of that myself. And one of the reflections I had later is we've been talking about salvation in different ways this week, and how God is the initiator, right? God does most of the work for us, really, as we see on the cross. He's done pretty much everything, and yet he doesn't need to, but he allows us to cooperate with him in the work of salvation, in the work of our own salvation. He invites us to cooperate in that. And it's actually, again, he could just save us like that if he wanted, but he has set things up in such a way to really affirm us, to allow us to join him, and in so doing, to be filled with the dignity as sons and daughters, as people made in his image and likeness, who can really engage our will and participate with him. Amen? That's really one of the blessings of participating in this grace of salvation. So, anyways, that was just kind of a neat reflection I had after all those broken spokes. But as far as endurance, again, it wasn't a piece of cake, but it was a challenge to bike across Canada. I mean, a typical day we would try and average between 100 to 120 kilometers, fully loaded down and stuff, and we'd start every day, breaking camp, eat something, cycle for several hours, set up camp somewhere, cook some dinner, and go to sleep, and do the same thing over and over and over again. And of course, one of the main endurance points had to do with your rear end, right? Like you had to, you can spend $1,000 on a seat, and it doesn't matter. Like you're still going to be sore at the end of the day. So that's one of the realities of bicycle touring. But the other thing, and this kind of happened, I think, a little bit west, a few days west of Algonquin Park, where Brian and I we had been going through this routine for some weeks now, probably a month at this point. And part of the other thing is you're traveling with as little as possible, because there's just not that much you can carry. And you need some bicycle tools, you need some whatever. You're picking up food on the way in. And so we had this ultralight tent, which was sweet. This ultralight two-man tent, which was ultra small as well. And so, here we are, spending the whole day together. There's like a lot of these stretches of Canada, there's like nobody else, right? Just the two of us. And then we're kind of sleeping in the same quarters, like we had separate sleeping bags and everything else, but we're like shoulder to shoulder, pretty much, And eventually we got to this point where it's like, or I did anyway. I was like, I can't stand this guy. I love the guy, but I hate him. Like everything he is saying is getting under my skin. Everything he does. Why does he bike that way? Why does he have to pedal that way? Everything. And there's probably a stretch of about 3 days where we didn't even talk to each other. Maybe hand gestures or whatever, But, and it was kind of, eventually, it dawned on me, I wonder if this is what marriage is like. And I was just sort of like, thanks be to God for the call to priesthood, but anyways, no, I love marriage, I love married couples and everything. I just want to affirm you. But just to recognize, I don't think your call is that easy every single day. There's a certain degree of endurance that is involved in that too. But we eventually, one of us broke the ice and we talked it out and talked about what was going on and everything and laughed about it and prayed about it and in the end it was great. And to this day he's one of my best friends. He really is. But it was something we had to persevere through. It was a relationship where there was a great deal of endurance required. And coming out the other end, like I say, we're so much stronger. And that's been the case in my life with people where I've really wrestled with, where I've had to repent and forgive and get to the other side of it. Those are the relationships that I can really trust and lean into. And anyways, in the end, we made it back to Ottawa. I can't remember if it was 39 or 40 days. It was either like the biblical 40 days in the desert or the 39 lashes. It was one of the two. But all right, so our next adventure here, walking the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. So this is a photo I took with my own camera. I love that one. It's in the Pyrenees Mountains. We started off, there's the three of us, a seminarian, and then another friend, a CCO missionary. You can keep going there. Yeah, it's the typical hill. This is, looking at the hill we're about to climb. Blisters, there's a lot of those. At least the Hello Kitty Band-Aids helped. But this is one of the beautiful Gothic cathedrals in a town called Burgos. And then this is entering the middle section called the Meseta. It kind of reminded me of the prairies, in fact. And then this is right at the sea, at the Atlantic Ocean. We'd come to the end of the line. They call it Finisterre, the end of the world. And we got to celebrate Mass right out there. I know I look like the Marshmallow Man in that shot, but... And then here we are actually in Santiago itself, outside of the cathedral. Has anybody seen the movie The Way? Yeah, I recommend it. It's a good one with Martin Sheen, Emilio Estevez. It's a pretty good depiction of the Camino, of this walk. The one thing, they don't show any blisters, right? So it's not true to form. But I guess if there were a T-shirt, it would just say, "Eat, sleep, walk, repeat." Right? That was the Camino. For 800 kilometers, that's what we did. Eat, sleep, and walk. It took us about 5 weeks to do it. This is the Camino, of course. It's an ancient pilgrimage. Back in the Middle Ages, about 1,000 years ago, there were three main places where people would go on pilgrimage. The first being Rome, the second being the Holy Land, and the third being Santiago. And so anybody going on pilgrimage, often it was with a particular motive in mind. Sometimes it was to give thanks to God for a great blessing that He had bestowed upon them. Sometimes it was as an act of penance, as they're repenting for some serious sin. And sometimes it was carrying a prayer intention with them along the way. And so there are several roads actually that lead to Santiago. We did what was called the French way, which is the most traditional one, as I say, 800 kilometers. It begins in southern France, in the Pyrenees Mountains, And it's actually very close to Lourdes, if you've ever been there. And then within the first day, we've crossed the mountain. It's kind of a brutal first day, like in, I don't know, God's sense of humor or whatever. You haven't trained, and the first day you're like climbing, you're ascending for 20 kilometers, and then there's this sheer 7-kilometer drop. And I think the downhill is even worse than the uphill. And the whole time there's weather, there's everything. That's day one. And so, anyways, by the end of the first day, you're inside of Spain, and then the rest of the journey you travel west until you eventually arrive in Santiago, in the northwest corner of Spain. So the reason we go to Santiago is that's just Spanish for St. James, and there lie the remains of St. James the Great. So one of the 12 apostles, and that's why this pilgrimage was set up, and so many blessings and so many graces over the centuries. It's really neat to travel on roads like we're walking on old Roman roads at times that have been there for how many centuries. But again, unfortunately, it wasn't that everybody on the Camino was doing it for religious reasons. The three of us, as we started, were probably the only ones we knew of who were, every time we'd stop, we'd be looking for a church where we could pray, have some silence, because surrounding us were most of the Europeans, some from North America, and then there's all these South Koreans. I don't know why, but they were everywhere. They're just very no other Asian countries, but just South Korea, and they were really keen. But there we were, and these people, different motives. Again, kind of like that hippie tree planting crowd. They were looking for an adventure, looking for a party. It was a cheap vacation, right? They had these albergues, which is kind of like an inn for pilgrims, and some of them were as cheap as €5 a night. So a cheap vacation. Some people, they were trying to lose weight. Other people, I could probably think of easier ways to do than that. But other people, they were getting over something or a transition point. They were changing jobs, or they were going through a divorce, or one of their loved ones had passed away. And anyway, so there were all these reasons, and again, there are very few people who were Catholic disciples walking with the Lord. And so what I found, it was actually mission territory. And the one thing unifying all of us is that everybody was kind of searching. And so there was this openness to enter into conversations with people all over the place. I wore my collar pretty much everywhere, and so people got to know me. You sort of travel in these groups, and you might stay at the same albergue for a few nights, and then some people might be a bit faster, and so they'll go ahead, and you won't see them for a day, and then you'll catch up, and a few days later, whatever. And so I remember this one German guy who, he was just kind of like amazed, right? His experiences of priests were all old fuddy-duddies or whatever, and so I remember him saying like, "Father Simon, you are so cool." It's like, hey, thanks, man, thanks. But anyways, I don't know how that got into the talk. But, here I am, I'm this relatively young guy in relatively decent shape. I thought, this will be relatively easy. Yeah. Yeah, right. I so underestimated the physical challenge of it. There were people in their 70s walking the Camino, and some of them were just motoring along, like no problem. And I'm thinking, this is painful. This is a lot more challenging than I expected it to be. Humility has never been one of my strong suits, and so watching these people who are twice my age zoom past me, the three of us, I think part of the problem, the three of us as we began, this is the whole group at the end. There was a group of young adults, mainly from the Detroit area, so a total of 18 in all by the end of it. But the three of us, when we began, I think we were a little ambitious, right? We started strong. We were going fast, trying to keep up with maybe some other people who had been going for a little while. And we got to, early on, maybe it was around day 3, we got to a place called Pamplona. You probably heard running with the bulls. That's the town we arrived in. Now, the seminarian I was with, he's having some issues with his dentures. I mean, what do you call it? Retainer. And anyways, it was one of those permanent retainer things. You have to get it cemented into your mouth or whatever. And so it was coming loose. And so somehow we managed to phone ahead to Pamplona. And we were still, I think, in the town prior. And I mean, somehow, because none of us really spoke Spanish or anything, but we booked him an appointment. And so there we are. We left our friend behind, and Seminarian Marcus and I, we have our full backpacks, and like we're not running with the bulls, but we're running to the orthodontist through the streets of Pamplona, right? And we finally, we got there just in the nick of time before the guy took off, went on some trip or whatever, and boy, did he ever cement Marcus's mouth shut. But I think, that in addition with just the fact that we've been pushing hard, that came at a cost. That intensity, that we were going too fast, too hard, too long, too early, right? And so that came at a cost by the end of the week. By the end of week 1, I started to notice that I was having tendinitis in my Achilles. It turned out my Achilles heel was my Achilles heel. And it wasn't funny. I wasn't laughing about it. It was inflamed. And the main remedy for tendinitis, I'm not a doctor, but I'm told it's rest, which is hard to do when you have to wake up tomorrow morning and walk another 25 kilometers to the next destination. And so day after day, I'd be walking on it in pain. At every opportunity, I would try and ice it. Luckily I had these walking poles, so they're like canes or crutches for me, and I was taking regular doses of ibuprofen. But it was painful. It was a real trial for me. The way the French way is set up, I would say there's 3 main sections. You start, as I say, in this town called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in France, and then you go to Burgos, which is after Pamplona, the next really big city. And there's, it's early in the journey. You're excited. Everything's new. Making a sandwich from a deli is kind of like, you've never done this before. It's so much fun. And then, you've never done it before in Spain. And with chorizo and all. Anyways, then the last third from León, where there's actually Gothic cathedrals in Burgos and León, and so from León to Santiago, you're entering Galicia, which is another. There's some nice hills, and it's beautiful and picturesque in different cities. But this stretch between Burgos and León is infamously known as the Meseta, which I don't know what that means, but it's. I think in Spanish, mesa maybe means table. It just means it's flat. It's kind of like driving along the Trans-Canada through Saskatchewan. And so, or biking along the Trans-Canada, as I am very familiar with. It's just flat. It's flat, and it's boring, and it's dry, and we were doing it in July. So you can imagine how hot it was. And so, walking through this meseta, I remember one day I was hobbling into this town. We had done about 400 kilometers at this point, but we still had at least 400 to go. And not only was I in physical pain, but it turns out the seminary, like a word of advice, if you're going to do the Camino, bring somebody slower than you along. The seminarian I was with, he's from British Columbia, and I think as a career, he was into forestry stuff or something, so all he would do all day long was like hike up and down giant mountains with like heavy backpacks on his. He was like bred for walking the Camino. He was famous that summer actually as one of the fastest Camino walkers. Everybody knew, they were like, Marcus, oh, Barba Roja, like the red-bearded one. Like they knew exactly who he was. Like I'd have to say, Barba Roja? Donde es Barba Roja? And they were like, oh yeah, he went this way. So he was like one of the fastest guys, right? He would meet all these people throughout the day because he'd be catching up to them and passing them and meeting other groups. And meanwhile, I'm like hobbling along, and talk about, just the humiliation, right? Again, this prideful choleric who thinks he's in good shape or whatever, and I'm like wondering, am I gonna drag my sorry, what, all the way to Santiago like this? Is this what it's gonna be like? Like, I'm too stubborn to give up. But this is not the glorious summer that I imagined, right? This is not the fun, exciting Camino experience that we watched in the movie and everything else. This is painful. And so we get to this town, and it was called Carrion de los Condes, I believe. And I'm just feeling so pathetic. I'm filled with self-pity, I'm not having fun. Basically, I'm again just faced with that temptation. Like, just give up. Just take a bus to the next town. Just rest for a few days. It's not a big deal. You still walked 400 kilometers. Like, who can say they've even done that? And the expression, God knows exactly how much we can handle, right? Well, these two seminarians we had met from Sicily. Now, normally I don't trust people from Sicily, out of fear of the mafioso connections, whatever. Pope Francis has had some strong things to say about that. But I was pretty desperate. So the one of them, they were really nice guys, actually. The one of them was a little bit older, and he was a later vocation. He had been a nurse. And so he volunteered. He offered to look at my ankle, and he, rubbed some kind of magical anti-inflammatory cream on it and bandaged me up. And then he gave me this oral medication as well. And it was just like this wonderful experience, like just feeling loved, just feeling cared for. And the next day, like, honestly, it was the best day I'd had in probably 2 weeks. I just felt great. I asked him later, like, what was that stuff you gave me? Did you give me morphine, or what was that? He said, no, it's a stronger version of ibuprofen, he said. But whatever it was, I felt great. And it's like this black market Sicilian ibuprofen. I brought a little bit with me in case I need it this week, but the journey continued, and there were challenges. There were different kinds of challenges that I had to continue to persevere in. But there were so many blessings too. I think I'm gonna take the time and share a couple of quick stories of one was this lady from Poland. She didn't speak a lick of English, and it was amazing. You're meeting people from all over the place who don't speak each other's languages, and yet you're somehow communicating. And we're all on this journey together. We're all supporting each other. We all want each other to succeed, really. And I'd seen her at Mass the day before, and so here I am walking, and this particular day, I was cruising. Like, I was setting a new personal best on the 1K. I've got my poles and everything, and I see her, and I'm coming up. Like, this is one of the things. Everybody goes at their own pace, and that's actually part of what you learn is you need to walk at your own pace, right? Don't compare yourself with other people, how fast you think they're going or whatever. You need to walk at the pace you need to walk at, right? So anyways, I see her there, and I'm motoring along, and I have to admit, like, she's moving really slow. She looks like she's in pain. And the first thought, I'm embarrassed to say, the first thought through my head is, if I slow down to talk to her, like that's going to reduce my heart rate. And here I am, like just feeling really great and whatever. But thankfully, a grace moment, the Lord just convicted me, like, yeah, you better at least say hi. So I kind of stopped. I was like, hey Nina, how you doing? And I noticed she had a knee brace on, and so I kind of pointed to her knee, and I was like, are you hurting? And she like nodded her head vigorously, and she pointed to both knees, and so I was like, can I pray over you? And she said yes, and so I knelt down for like 10 seconds. I laid hands on her knees and just asked the Lord to bless her and heal her. And before the words were even out of my mouth, I was already up and I was gone, right? I was down the path. And I had barely made it 20 paces, and I hear, Padre! And I turn around, and here's this Polish lady. She is running towards me, grinning from ear to ear. She had been healed like that. Even I saw her later that night at Mass, and I asked, any pain? It was totally gone. Totally gone. And I assure you, it wasn't because of my faith. I think the Lord blessed her because of her own faith, right? But that was one of the blessings. As we endure on this journey, the Lord gives us little signs, little reminders that He's with us. He hasn't forgotten about us. He can still use each and every one of us in powerful ways. Another one, it wasn't a physical healing, but I remember talking to this guy, meeting this guy from Italy, who, now, I don't speak any Italian, and he doesn't speak any English, right? We're in Spain, and I know like a bit of French, enough French to get into trouble, and he's like, so somehow we're communicating with each other, lots of hand gestures and stuff. And he really wanted to talk to me though, right? And so we got onto this topic of Mary Magdalene and Jesus, and I can't remember how he put it. It was sort of like, did Mary Magdalene and Jesus, and I was like, all I can think is Dan Brown has been translated into Italian. This is terrible. Like, and what am I? And everything within me, my immediate reaction is just to slam, certain authors who are not very historically honest and credible and whatever. But again, there was this grace moment, and I just said to him, "Can I tell you about the real Mary Magdalene?" She was this woman who had committed sins far worse than you or I. And she met Jesus, and he forgave her. And this guy said to me in this broken English, "How can I be forgiven?" And the conversation that followed was so beautiful. He was in tears. I remember we stopped at this cafe. I went into the washroom, and I'm in there, and I'm in tears, and the lights went out. There in Europe, all the lights are on timers. They're so energy efficient. But anyways, it was this beautiful moment, and I realized probably the reason I was on the Camino was for that one conversation, and it was so worth it. It was so worth persevering through all the pain, all the dehydration, all the discouragements, all of it, to be a vessel of God's mercy to one person. Let's move on to the 30-day Ignatian Silent Retreat. So there's no photos, unfortunately. I do have a couple of photos. They're on my camera back in Ottawa. I forgot to bring them. But honestly, most of those are just like of me posing as if in prayer, right? So it's not like you're missing anything. I'm just like, and these different shots, these different angles. But the 30-day Ignatian retreat, in some ways, this was more challenging than any of the other previous endurance challenges. I went to this place in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is kind of south of here, so, surrounded by cornfields. And I brought my bike along too, even though I had been so jaded by cycling through the prairies. But, here's what a typical day was like. I know the schedule here is pretty intense, and there's this orientation you guys are going through, and you're being stretched, right? Well, here's what our schedule looked like. So I'd wake up, I'd grab a coffee and pray some breviary. Then I'd do 1 hour of personal prayer, right? I think here we're doing 2 half-an-hour segments, which is beautiful, and I just really applaud that. I'd grab some breakfast. I'd meet with my spiritual director for an hour. That was the only time I could talk in the day, right? And I talked for sure, but only during that hour with that one person. And then we'd have Mass, and then I'd do my second hour of personal prayer. And then we'd have lunch, all in silence, by the way. And I'd relax for a bit, kick back with some spiritual reading, and for fun. And then, I'd usually grab a coffee and do a third hour of personal prayer. And then I'd get an hour off to exercise. And so for some of you, that would be fun. For others, that maybe not so. But, so there was all kinds of things we could do. I'd go for a run. I had my bike with me. Generally speaking, I would bike into the wind so that on the way back I could have a tailwind. I learned from previous experiences. There was also a beautiful outdoor swimming pool at the summer camp across the way, so sometimes I'd go there. And there was even a kayak we could borrow, and we could use it at this small lake. And I'd recently been to Poland, and so just inspired so much by the life of St. John Paul II that I thought to myself, maybe if I kayak and eat more pierogies, I'll become a saint. So it still hasn't. I've been eating the pierogies, and it's still. I'm waiting for the sanctity. But anyways, so I do one of these. Right, they even had a little gym where you could lift weights or whatever. But so I do some kind of physical activity mid-afternoon, come back, and then after that I do my 4th hour of personal prayer before supper. And right after supper, I'd have a little bit of downtime. So for fun, I'd do some spiritual reading. And then I'd usually pray a rosary. Sometimes there was a little Stations of the Cross we could walk along. On Fridays, I do the Stations of the Cross on top of everything else. But I decided not to do that daily because that might be a bit much. And then also at one point I was thinking of adding the Angelus on top of everything. It's like, you don't want to become a fanatic. So then after the rosary, I joined the group. They'd have exposition of the Blessed Sacrament, during which I do my 5th hour of personal prayer. Right? So that's 5 hours of personal prayer, not including the rosary, Mass, the breviary, Chaplet of Divine Mercy. I usually pray the chaplet, while I was exercising or something, multitasking. But because there was so much to do. It was like people were asking me, were you bored? It's like, there's so much to do. And by the time I had finished that 5th hour of personal prayer before the Blessed Sacrament, I'd usually wind down by going through a long list of intercessions I brought with me, pray for all these people, my family and the community and others, and then finish off whatever breviary I had left for the night, and then go to sleep, and then wake up and do the same thing all over again. So it was an exercise in endurance, but it was beautiful, surprisingly. I didn't think I would be able to do that. I would have never imagined in a million years, praying for 5 hours a day. But the Lord really blessed it. It was a grace time. They say that there's this maxim, in the silence, everything is amplified. And so, whether it's somebody grinding their teeth or whether it's, just a deeper awareness of what's going on interiorly. I mean, I started to realize I was so much more acutely aware of even how much food I was eating. I could tell you like exactly how much I needed to eat at breakfast to have enough energy to make it to lunch, and there too, and at supper. I was sharing with the students earlier, because I am so holy, I told the Lord, I'm going to give up desserts for 30 days. I have a bit of a sweet tooth, and that first day, they had laid out these beautiful brownies, and what I came to realize is the food was all right, but the desserts were to die for. Like, they were just, I don't know if they were like some French chefs or something. They come in and making all these things that looked delightful. And so anyways, that first day I was like, it's Sunday, it's just the first day. I got to ease into this thing, maybe half a brownie wouldn't hurt anybody. It's not like it's a sin, and besides, I mean, it's just between me and the Lord, and He loves me anyways, and and I was inspired, as I told the students, with this prayer. It came to my heart, Jesus, I love you more than brownies. And you know what? I mean, you're laughing, but that was a breakthrough moment for me. Because there's so many things that I'm attached to. There's so many things that I do love, and I do love brownies. But side by side, if I had to choose, I really do love Jesus more than brownies. I don't always behave that way. I don't always act that way when it comes to all kinds of things. But when I really stop and think and reflect, and that was a beautiful, it was a gift. I'm not taking any credit for that, but the Lord really blessed me during that time. I mean, there was so many graces, many of which are very personal, but just even the fact of praying 5 hours a day. Typically, as companions, we try to pray 1 hour of personal prayer a day. So it was like condensing 5 months of prayer all into one slot. But even more than that was the spiritual direction. For me, it was like having basically 3 years of spiritual direction in 1 month. And so often I haven't taken that spiritual direction seriously in the past. It's like, a month or two goes by and you finally call up your spiritual director and meet, and it's like, it's been busy. Life's pretty good. I'm enjoying ministry or whatever. I'm tired. I'm this or that. But here it's like there's nothing to talk about except what you prayed about in the last 24 hours because you didn't do anything else. I mean, I could tell her about my bike ride or whatever, but I had this really amazing spiritual director. She was in her 70s, I guess. They called her the Velvet Hammer. For a good reason. I mean, she was just so sweet and so gentle, and she just pinned me to the wall a few times as well. I remember this one time just saying, I was kind of in this sort of like self-pity or whatever, saying, here I am struggling with distractions again, whatever distractions to, again, nobody here has ever had a lustful thought, but if you can imagine what that might be like, or distractions to pride or whatever, and she just said, you know what? You need to man up. I was like, what do you mean? I'm a man. What are you talking about? She's like you don't even have any faith. Here you are letting the enemy and these distractions totally run away with your prayer time. You're not focusing on the Lord. What's going on? And anyways, it was this real challenge, and I took it to heart. At another point, as we're again coming into some of the same stuff, and now by this point, I've done enough endurance activities that I was expecting there to be at some point in the middle a struggle, a difficult point, like I experienced in the Camino, like I'd experienced those rough days tree planting, or even cycling. I was expecting it to come. So when it came, it wasn't as shocking. But I remember chatting with her, and she said, marathon runners, and I'm thinking, I hate running. Why did she have to bring it? But marathon runners, and I've never run a marathon, but she said, there's this thing they experience where they hit the wall. They're running, and they get to a point where they hit the wall. And they have to push through that in order to finish the race. And I was like, wait, what you're describing, I've done that, actually. Like this one time when I was tree planting or biking across the country or walking the Camino, I think I've done that. I think I know what you're talking about. She said, the kind of endurance and strength that you have developed physically, you need to develop that interiorly. You have not developed that to this point. You need that. And it was shocking, but it was true. And from that point on, there became this beautiful desire to grow in an interior strength that really I have not had up until that point. And again, a major breakthrough, an increase in my faith, in my confidence in the Lord, and it was just such a gift. It was I would say, I think of my conversion experience as happening when I was 18 in my last year of high school, but really it was like I went through another conversion this summer doing this 30-day retreat. And at the end of it, I just thought to myself, I'm probably the holiest guy I know. Anyways, and then I lost all the grace and went back to where I was. That's a couple of things I just wanted to pull together from all of these experiences, a little summary of some of the, what I would call strategies for finishing the race. So, number one, early to bed, early to rise. In all of these instances, when I was planting trees, when I was walking the Camino, we were going to bed early, we were waking up early. In my normal life, I'm nocturnal by nature. I would love to normally stay up late and party it up, whoop it up with, all the youngins. But this is something, and Father Bob really instilled it in us, that the decision to stay up late is the decision not to pray the next morning. So make a choice. Are you going to pray? Are you going to spend time with the Lord or not? And I think to the degree that this principle has helped me in all of these other experiences of endurance, I think it will help us in real life. And again, I'm speaking especially to you young people. As you're still early on in your journey and you're forming habits, but habits that will carry you for the rest of your life. Early to bed, early to rise. Okay. So number 2, get physical. And don't take that to a bad place, but it might be, I just wanted that to be easy to remember. Exercise. I think that's something that is so crucial to all of us. And I, in all of the experiences, including this retreat of prayer, exercise was so essential. I would not have prayed as well had I not been exercising in some way every single day. And I mean, it doesn't mean you have to run half a marathon daily, but it means do something physical, even if it just means going for a walk. Do something. You will feel better, and it will impact all of you. We've been talking about a little bit of anthropology of the human person and the little snowman, right? The body, the soul, and the spirit. It's all interconnected. And so exercise and also healthy nutrition, it's okay to treat yourself once in a while, as I certainly have, but be aware of what you're eating. What's the stuff you're putting into the body, and on a regular basis, if you're going to stuff that's not going to help you, it's, again, you're forming a habit that will not bless you in the long run. Okay, number 3. Less screen, more green. And I just think that this is a tough one. This is a hard sell, and I know people are going to say I'm old-fashioned. We're living in a day and age when, priests are whatever on Facebook, and bishops are blogging, and the Pope is tweeting and everything else. So, but I really sincerely believe, I'm not talking about like an absolute sort of censorship of all the electronics. But I was on this flight this was on the way to Poland in the spring, and we're in this little space. There's 3 of us in our row, probably the size of half of one of these pews. And let me think. We each had some kind of tablet. Somebody had given me this tablet. I was like, I don't want this thing. They're like, no, Father, you need this. I'm like, okay, well. So I took it with me, and I kind of liked it, but it's amazing how addictive these things become. And so, we each have a tablet, and at one point, like, I'm praying bravery on my tablet, and some guy's reading and whatever. They put away their 2 tablets, and they each had smartphones, right? So they're on their smartphones, and then we each had individual screens on the seat in front of us, right? So are we at 8 screens now? And I'm sure we each own laptops, right? 11. And how many televisions and whatever, you know what I mean? Like, is that not insanity? Like, how many screens do we need? And how much time are we spending in front of them? And is that making our lives richer? And so, again, just to say, I think there's such a blessing. They do make our lives easier, but set limits for yourself. And I would say, in place of that, get outside. Get some fresh air. This could be linked with the previous one of exercise. Take in some of the beauty of nature. Okay, number 4. Silence for the soul. And I had to get in Therese, of course. But we've been talking about prayer, and I think this week in particular, trying to go deeper. We're trying to make prayer more personal, more honest, and prayer can even be restful. I'm not talking about falling asleep, although Therese did say, there were times when she would fall asleep during prayer, and how much do parents love their kids when they're awake and when they're asleep? Sometimes they love them more when they're asleep. But anyways, the point is, we need to have this in our lives, this real deep silence that is prayer. That goes deeper than just and not to take anything away from it, but in addition to the Mass and the Rosary and the Liturgy of the Hours, but a deeper kind of prayer in conjunction with both. Okay. This is I needed to throw in a little bit of my Indo-Canadian heritage. My parents are from India, and Abduk Firsuk. This is something my dad would say all the time, and I was like, what does that mean? But it's Hindi, and it means now pain, later joy. And I think if you want to endure, you need to have the attitude that, yeah, there is some pain right now. There's some pain as I'm developing these muscles, as I'm getting used to things. But there is a great joy that awaits us. And we can see it all over the face of the Roman pontiff, right? He's definitely endured some trials. And so too, I think just having that mindset, having that attitude is a good way to prepare ourselves so that we can be ready for the joy of the Lord. So often today it's the opposite, right? Let's get in as much joy, as much pleasure, as much whatever right now. And it's upside down. It's backwards. And so we're shocked when there's pain, when there's a little bit of a trial, a little bit of suffering. It's like, whoa, how dare, suffering be inflicted on me? That's, we need to get over ourselves and really develop this strength. And this is one of the attitudes that will help us. Okay. Another good endurance strategy, I think, is to anticipate the desert and press on. And that's really helped me in my life. To know that there's going to be desert moments, to expect them, to not be so surprised when they come, but to plan for them and plan that you're going to press on. You're going to keep going. You're going to push through when the going gets tough. Okay. And finally, to seek out good mentors and good companions. And so this in particular, I think, we see that here at this school, the community, the necessity of good Christian friendship, and also of good Christian mentorship. I think we need to have people, and again, my own parents were an incredible model for me, but I think outside of my parents, because those relationships, there's a bit of complexity there too, it's helpful to have people who are a few steps ahead of us on the journey, who can really guide us and who we can trust, we can look to, we can ask for wisdom, who have maybe been through some of the things we're going through and can help us. So I think, just to say, to not just by happenstance, but to really seek them out. I stumbled across this passage the other day. I was looking up the passage for, again, turn your Bibles with me if you would, to Sirach 6, look it up later. There's this beautiful passage about a faithful friend. A faithful friend is a sturdy shelter. He that has found one has found a treasure. Right? And I kept reading, and this is what I found towards the end of chapter 6. If you see an intelligent man, visit him early. Let your foot wear out his doorstep. It is he who will give you insight to your mind, and your desire for wisdom will be granted. Isn't that beautiful? So, actively seek out good friends and good mentors, people who will support you in this journey, because it is a tough journey. I'm not going to candy coat it for you. There's painful moments. There's trials. The reason why I'm going through the trouble of doing this, and actually it was a bit of a trial, just so you know, to put together a talk like this, but it's because there's people my age and younger who are really struggling. They're struggling with trials. They're struggling with their faith. They're struggling just with life in general. They're struggling with their vocations. They're really facing real temptations to throw in the towel. And I just think that this kind of endurance is, I like to think of it as a holy stubbornness, right? No matter what, I am not going to give up. I'm going to commit to the goal that I've set out. I'm going to get my carcass to heaven, and I'm going to bring as many people with me. I am not going to give up. I don't care how hard this gets. I don't care how uncomfortable this is. I will not give up. Because the second you start to entertain those thoughts, wouldn't it be easier if? Wouldn't it be nicer if? Couldn't I just, who loves to fill in those blanks? Satan. Frankly, the enemy loves to fill in those blanks. He loves to lead us astray. He loves to get us off course, away from the very things that we have set out to do. I'm getting towards the end here, but just to say, a priest friend of mine, he said this. Somebody came up to him and asked, Father, when did you decide to be a priest? You know what he said? This morning. Right? When did you decide to get married? When did you decide to be a disciple? This morning. This is the day that I decided that I'm going to keep walking. Amen? Amen? I hope that all of us will one day be able to join with St. Paul in saying this beautiful line in his last will and testament from 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith.
And spiritually speaking, I think there's a great meal. Some nice side dishes of humor, good content, good cheer. So thank you so much. In a moment, we'll have the opportunity to eat well downstairs, some social time, some coffee, some tea, some snacks. Before break, though, I'd like to invite Chris O'Hara, who's our program PR guy. Tell us about what's coming up, Chris. Thanks.
Every time I get introduced, I have a different title.
It's Chris.
Coordinator Program Promotion, which means that it's my job to invite people to attend events like these. Everyone knows that we have the School of Faith Formation at St. Therese, but we also do a lot of events and conferences and retreats and programs throughout the year, so I just want to let you know about a few of them. This is the smallest sample size, just a couple of hours, so we're going to move up incrementally. We've got Time in Therese retreat coming up. I've got some brochures I'll be at the back handing out. This is roughly 24 hours from supper on Friday till supper on Saturday, more or less. It's a silent retreat for the most part, and we have one for the feast day of St. Therese, so that's coming up October 3rd and 4th, and we have another one coming up for Advent. So this is a great opportunity to come spend a day at St. Therese in silence and recollection, not quite 30 days, but maybe give you a little bit of a taste of the silence and the opportunity to go into the interior life that Father Simon was talking about. Just $75 as well, so this is what's coming up right away. The next longest, if 24 hours isn't enough, you can spend 4 days here at St. Therese this coming Lent. The day after Ash Wednesday, we have our annual Lenten conference coming up, right on the back of the Time in Therese flyer, so you don't need to take too much paper. Father Donald Cowell is coming. We have a different guest every year come and speak at our Lenten conference. You may know him as the surfer priest. He's got a lot of great stories. He's got actually an incredible life story himself of conversion. He lived in Japan, was essentially kicked out of the country in chains, and a remarkable story about conversion, especially the intercession of Mary. So we've titled the conference, Mary, Mother of Mercy. So this one's coming up in Lent. If you register though before December 1st, we've got a great early bird discount rate. You can save $75. And we also have a commuter rate, so anyone who lives locally, most of you here are actually within commuting distance, so we have a great commuter rate as well. So you can take a look at this one, and then one of our key featured programs we run at St. Therese is the 9-day Triumph Retreat, 5 days of which is silence, and it's a real opportunity to rediscover your spiritual childhood, to spend 9 days looking at your past, looking at your relationship with God the Father in particular, through the lens of spiritual childhood, inspired by St. Ignatius, who wrote the exercises, the 30-day retreat, as well as St. Therese of Lisieux. A real great opportunity for inner healing, one that has yielded incredible fruit in everyone who's taken the program, a few hundred now at this point in our history. So this is the biggest slice outside the 9-month faith formation program they'll get at St. Therese. So I'll be at the back right on your way out of the chapel, and you can take one example of each, and hopefully we'll see you back here again soon. Thank you very much.